All right, it's the Lex and Pete show. This is the build-up. This is the trade deadline week, as we've talked about and we've tried to figure out a million times in the group chat. The trade deadline is officially at the end of this week's Monday Night Football game. That is the Eagles and the Commanders. So this episode, I think it's just going to be very trade heavy. I'd say 100% trade talk almost. We'll get into that after a brief word from our sponsor. As always, we're brought to you by Sundog Multimedia. Sundog is an online communication and social media company. They were once just a personal tool that has since evolved into something much bigger, allowing users to communicate, research, and discover things that impact their lives and daily decisions. Sundog will collaborate with you to help build a modern yet nimble social media strategy by utilizing innovative and traditional media principles. Sundog is also a proud supporter of the Stop Soldier Suicide Foundation. You can follow them on Instagram at sundog_multimedia. That's Instagram at sundog_multimedia. Brains, brawn, and true professionalism. That's easy peasy moving and service, moving, muscle for hire, assembly, errands, you name it. Easy peasy is a multi-purpose team. If you need something, just ask. All right, Pete. As we were talking about before the show, it has been a pretty eventful day, week. It's been some interesting stuff since our last episode. This is not the end of the deadline. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, the deadline is at the end of, and that is the end. As soon as the game ends, you cannot make any more trades. That might not be true. I feel like there might be a little bit of a grace period, maybe to like midnight or something. Regardless, if you really have a deal you want to get done, I recommend not waiting until that and not fucking around and finding out exactly when the cutoff is on the deadline. There's no need to not do it even 30 minutes earlier than the end of the game time. But we've gotten a pretty good start. There's 4 trades that we're going to talk about today. Before we get deep into any of them, let's just check in with you, Pete. How are you doing? How are you feeling? You yourself have a deal. That's the last one that we're going to get to on the list. But how are you feeling about just in general these trades that have gone down in the last week?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, I think yesterday I put that poll out there, like who's going to make the next trade. Because I think a lot of people are feeling like people were talking, but it wasn't necessarily actually going into trades. It wasn't fruitful trade talks. And then they kind of just dominoes fell today. So I love to see the action. It's always the lead the league, and anytime a trade goes down, gets me up. So I'm excited for today, and I'm still holding out. It's going to be some more fireworks towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like from the people that have been talking about selling, of course, we've said it time and time again. Right now, it looks like Jalot and McMorrow are the big sellers. Jalot, he did make a move today. It sounds like he's got more on the horizon. We'll get into it when we get to him and his trade, but I hope he has more on the horizon. This was a huge move for him, but it wasn't really something that we were necessarily expecting. McMorrow, I feel like the pressure's kind of on him to at least do something now that Jalot has actually made a trade. McMorrow, he's kind of talked a big game about being a big seller at the deadline. We'll get into that kind of when we get to our wish list segment, but I will be interested to see what he's got ahead of us. But I say we just keep it rolling. We just go right into these trades. So I think the first one we'll do is the one that didn't involve either of us. But it's still, I'd say, a pretty massive trade in terms of the players involved. This one was between Bowen and Amaral. Bowen, I'll say who they received. So Bowen got Amon Ra, and he got Jalot's 2023 third rounder. Amaral got Trey Lance, and then he got 2 seconds. He got Bowen and Simcoe's 24 seconds. Pete, what's your knee-jerk reaction to this? Because I think we can kind of tie it in. We could start talking about this. We could tie it into the next deal, my deal with Amaral. But I think this is an interesting one for him. I'm curious to see what you think about it.
Yeah, knee-jerk reaction was I expected this move for a quarterback from Amaral. So it was obvious coming out as soon as he adopted this team, he knew he was going to make a move for quarterback. He literally had nothing on his roster. So it was kind of about when is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? And what is he going to pay? I think he bought Trey Lance at probably the lowest price possible since he's been drafted. Just giving up Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, he's obviously been great this year so far. I'm a little optimistic for Jameson Williams, so I'm not sure if that's going to affect his workload. I don't really think you could say that because we've seen two wide receivers succeed in the systems this year. But I think Amaral, I love this trade for Amaral. I love it for Bowen, but I do like it a little bit more for Amaral because he did have to make a move for a quarterback. I think he bought Lance at the lowest possible price he could have. And he still has that high ceiling, right? Like Seattle or San Francisco is all into the Super Bowl. They're going to have a good team next year as well. And he's in line to still take over, and he has that rushing upside. So I think he bought Lance at the lowest, and he's got that upside. So I love this move for Amaral, and I think it's a great piece for Bowen to add for a championship run.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of a win-win for both sides. I don't really know what the trade calculators are saying, but when I look at it, I see it as for Amaral, maybe Trey Lance hasn't necessarily lived up to the hype yet, and he hasn't really played much football, not only in the pros, but also in college. But I think that this is kind of a splash move that Amaral had to make, right?
Right.
Obviously, it could just completely fall on its face. What we've seen from Trey Lance can kind of be, maybe that's just what he is, and maybe he's not that great. But at the same time, we've seen these quarterbacks that even if they're not necessarily great real life quarterbacks, that rushing upside can keep them in the league and it can keep them certainly fantasy relevant. I mean, we saw, a guy like, Jalen Hurts last year who his job always seemed to be in danger, but he was a top 5 quarterback. But then all of a sudden, he got those weapons, and now we're starting to see him really come into his own and break out. And he was a 2nd-round quarterback, and Trey Lance, this is a guy that the Niners, they made that move to go get him. They took him at 3rd overall. And there's such a huge investment in him that they do have to just continue to give him these chances. And it did always just feel kind of weird when they were keeping Jimmy around, where given the aspirations of the team, given the build, given what we've seen Jimmy do with the same team, it did feel weird that they were so quick to move on from him. But I feel like the timelines kind of got crossed. Maybe they didn't expect to be this successful with Jimmy moving forward. So it is kind of a weird situation. But I believe he's a 1-year deal, so more than likely he's out the door anyways. I don't think that this is, this injury that Lance has is like career threatening or anything. I think he'll bounce back just fine. I think it's just broken bones, right? So as soon as those heal, he'll be able to get back out there. And with Bowen, I think it's interesting with Bowen, right? Because I mean, he's starting to kind of load up at receiver.
Yep.
Having Olave and having Amon-Ra now, and then of course, Tyreek and then Debo. But having those 2 young studs, I think, is great. And you would mention how Jameson, coming back. I do think that there is a chance maybe. Amon-Ra, he's getting these 12 targets a game. I think that with such a good target in Jameson, I think that can definitely detract from that a tiny bit. I don't think it'll matter too much, but it will be interesting to see, when these guys that are so reliant on you, Jesus Christ, when these guys
I'm battling through a little bit of a cold. my voice doesn't carry and bellow and bound like usually does. I'm battling.
Lord. but these guys that are so reliant on volume, all of a sudden when somebody comes in, it's it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not, I wouldn't really say it's great either, right? Having these guys come back. So, maybe we are kind of seeing peak Amon-Ra, but I don't think that when he comes down from that peak, it's necessarily going to be anything bad. It just might be, instead of 12 targets a game, it might just be 8 targets a game, but we know they can be effective with those. So I think it's a good trade for both. I think it's interesting. I am a little curious, what's next for Bowen. It always seems like he's never done. I know he's still working the lines. I know he's still looking to, maybe get a quarterback for that playoff push. So, it was interesting to see, and it was kind of cool. We can now segue into this next deal because it was, these deals happened simultaneously. But I think with Amaral, right, going back to what I was saying about it being a splash for him, it's like he inherited such a bad team that it's like, why not, right? Why not try and get these?
He had to make a move.
Yeah, so why not go out and get a guy that has, the makeup of a top 5 fantasy quarterback, right? So you go out, you get Lance, you get that rushing upside. And now all of a sudden you have something. You're not dealing with, moving forward with Jameis and PJ Walker and Baker Mayfield. You give yourself a name, you give yourself somebody to get excited about. So, I think it's a good investment for him. And then, working off of that, I think it's kind of the same thing with Swift. I think a lot of people, maybe this might have been a little bit more 50-50, a little more polarizing of a deal. But I think this is just another splash play that Amaral had to make, right? I mean, going out and getting a guy like Swift, who, I love Swift. And I think that a lot of times people take putting a guy on the trade block or trading him away, meaning that you're low on him or something. But I've kind of said in the past with Swift, I just felt like with where my team was at, I was kind of looking at that makeup and I felt like I needed a little more flexibility. And I realized that this is a guy who, just because he's one of my favorite players in the league, I had ruled him untouchable, but he was a gold mine that I was sitting on. And I just had to see what was out there. And, I got some offers from other teams where I felt like maybe, if you're putting the trade in a trade calculator, it was probably pretty even. But it just wasn't what I was trying to do, right? I was trying to really make a splash. I was trying to do something that would give me maybe some breathing room, some flexibility. And, getting these picks was really what I wanted to do. From Amaril's perspective, right? He goes out and he gets a guy that I think is a top running back dynasty asset, right? Obviously, he's dealing with the injuries right now, and Jamal Williams cutting into those carries, and those are well-earned carries and touches that Jamal Williams is getting too. It's not just the Lions coaching staff being weirdos and not wanting to use Swift. It's that Jamal Williams is also making it tough for them to take those carries back. So he got Swift. That's a huge splash for him to go with Lance. And those are two really young guys that you can build around. He got Curtis Samuel, who I think is one of those underrated assets. And, he might be a guy that can finish, wide receiver 15, but his value is always going to be something like wide receiver 30, kind of like that Jarvis Landry, how he's been in the past, couple seasons, especially our time that this league has existed, where it's a guy that you're never going to get that full value for him. But if he's on your team, he's a great depth piece. He's a great flex player for you. And, he can always be a great bye week fill-in. And I mean, even, he had a sick touchdown last week. And then, he also just got a couple more picks. He got McMorrow's 23-second, which could be coming down from where it is. It was last week we were talking about McMorrow kind of being on the up and up. And now all of a sudden McMorrow's looking to tear it completely down. So all of a sudden, I mean, between me, you, and Amaral, I think that the top three is locked in, but this is a pick that could potentially drop down to fourth. It could be fifth, but right now it's looking like he wants it to be in that top six and out of the playoffs regardless. So, that could also just be an interesting second round pick to go with the 113 comp pick. And, I think that what has a lot of people confused about what Amaral did is because he gave up not only Pickens, or I shouldn't say not only the 223 first, but also Pickens.
Right.
And, I do think that's interesting. And, I like it. I mean, obviously I took the deal. I like it. And, it was my offer, all that stuff. But, from my perspective, I really like what it did for my team. I mean, we can also, my perspective changed a little bit with this next trade, right? Where I traded Sanders, but I looked at it where I have Sanders, I had Monty, I have Khalil, I have Brian Robinson, and, I have a guy like Zamir White kind of waiting in the wings. And I feel like my running back situation is good enough. And I think it's interesting when you look at the two champions that we have, right? McMorrow was the inaugural champion. He was completely built off of those running backs, really was weak at quarterback, did not really have much at receiver. And then the next year we see almost the polar opposite with two pins where they're loaded at quarterback, they're loaded at receiver. We never really saw them with Kittle, but they do have a top tier tight end. And then they were kind of just getting pie, right? I think it was Darrell Williams was their starting running back for the playoffs mostly. And, so we've seen two completely different strategies, win this league. And right now my goal has kind of been to build around these receivers. I figure it's a dynasty league. This is a league that's kind of, if you want to have long-term success, you got to look for that longevity. And like I said, I thought my running backs were good enough. So now all of a sudden I'm looking at Drake London, Traylon Burks, George Pickens, Elijah Moore, Christian Watson, who I think is an interesting prospect, right? I mean, I don't know, he's a little old. He was a little raw coming in. He was playing, in the FCS and all that stuff, but I do think that he's interesting to have, right? And he can be that big play guy for the Packers. And I was talking to Simcoe this week and I said, even if he ends up just being like a tall Nelson Aguilar or something, it's like having that as like a depth piece on your bench is, pretty good for like those bye week fill-ins. And we've seen a guy like Aguilar go on these nice little runs and turn in those nice little seasons. So even if that's kind of like a worst case scenario for Christian Watson, I mean, I guess a worst case would be him just being a total bust. But, if that's what he could be for me as, a fifth or sixth receiver, because now I also have Ayuk with this next trade that we're going to talk about. I feel like I'm really built for long-term success with these receivers that are 22, 23, 24 years old. And then, with these first rounders in a pretty running back heavy draft, I'm definitely hoping to target running backs in this draft. So if I can all of a sudden fill the void with these guys, that's left behind from Sanders and Swift, and then all of a sudden I think I'm looking at a pretty good young team considering Tua's starting to kind of break out. He's very young. Still going to figure things out with who my second quarterback is. Would love to see a little bit more out of Mac, but even just going off of his rookie season, he looked like he was showing something. We're not necessarily seeing it this year, but he's young as well. So I got a really young team. I really like what it did for my team. I really like how it opened it up. How are you feeling about this trade? It was a pretty big one.
I love this trade. Love this trade. I don't think I've ever liked a trade that you've done more than this one for your team. It's no surprise that I haven't been a proponent of the trades in the past, like most of them. Obviously, I wrote that blog, but I love this trade. Could not love it more. The biggest thing why I like it is the strategy you said behind it, right? I'm kind of doing the same thing in my rebuild, but this league to win, I think, is about longevity with quarterbacks and wide receivers. That's where you want to start in a rebuild. Obviously, you, me, and Emerald are bottom three right now, and like running backs, you just aren't as predictable. The shelf life on them is not as great in the starting lineup. I know Swift's only 23, but Emerald's not going to be competing until what, 2 or 3 years down the road. That puts Swift to 25, 26. He's had the bumps and bruises his first 2 years, so like that's just a long time to hold on to a bell cow running back. I'm not really worried about Jamal Williams. He's an unrestricted free agent next year. I think he's played well enough to go get a bag somewhere else, unless he just has like a passion for Detroit and wants to see it like that team win. I would be a little concerned if he resigns, but he's played well enough to go somewhere else. And also, Detroit's offensive line is awesome. They've got one of the top 5 offensive lines in the NFL. It's really, really good. I think there's a ton of reason to love Swift. I just don't think it's a great investment for Amaral. I don't like the investment into running backs when you're looking at a 2-3 year rebuild. A lot can happen injury wise, a lot can happen carries wise. Who knows? But then again, on your side, I love it. Obviously, I'm a huge proponent of the 23 draft. You don't really have a great running backs right now. You said you could probably get by with Monty Khalil and Brian Robinson and them. But this class is literally headlined by running backs. You got 2 late picks, but there's still going to be like Zach Evans, Tank Bigsby, Sean Tucker. That A&M kid's pretty good. Zach Charbonnet from UCLA. Like there is a ton of running backs in this class that probably would have gone like, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 in this year's class if they were in that class, because running back was so shallow this year or in 2022. So I think you're kind of do the same thing that I'm looking at is rebuild wide receiver room first with young studs guys that have a higher ceiling, and then invest in picks and try to get back through the draft.
Yeah, and so the thing I will say about Swift, right, is that I do feel like there's a little bit of an aspect. I mean, I think that the value that I got from this trade wasn't selling low, but I think this point in time, right, this is kind of the lowest that I think Swift's value has been. And I think that was kind of part of my problem, right, where I was kind of shopping them around. And like I said, I got deals where if you were to put them in a trade calculator or something, you could probably look at it and say, oh yeah, that's like an even deal. But I just like wasn't really getting what I wanted, right? Simcoe and I, we were talking about trading Kyle Pitts, trading Swift, all that stuff. And it just felt like, I didn't feel like I was necessarily making my team any better. I felt like maybe I was just shifting value from, say, running back to tight end or something, where this was the type of haul that I was looking to get. And that required me to add things like the second rounder, that required me to add things like Curtis Samuel. But I think that it was all worth it, where I'm moving up from that second rounder. You can look at it. I'm moving up from that second rounder to a first rounder. And then, I'm also trading, including Samuel with Swift, to all of a sudden get, a first rounder and get Pickens and do all this stuff. But
I didn't even mention Pickens. Like I love Pickens as a prospect. They traded Claypool, and like Steelers wide receivers have a great pedigree. I forgot to mention.
yeah, and that was the thing, Amaral and I, we kind of had agreed in principle to the trade. And then I got a little bit scared once the Claypool thing happened, because I thought maybe that could blow it all up. Because all of a sudden I felt like Pickens' value, especially, they're coming off the bye. I'm excited to see
Right.
Pickens out of the bye, no Claypool, all that things. I'm hoping that he can have a big week and do something to get my team really fired up. But yeah, I mean, it was just like I was so as I was saying, when Amaral is kind of, I guess, defense, right? Swift can still be a little bit of an investment, and this might not be. I don't know what his intentions are with Swift, and I don't know if he's truly looking at him as a building block or if he's looking at him.
That's what it feels like.
Like I said, it could be almost like you're trying to like flip a house or something, and you get Swift now because you look forward next year, and I feel like if the Lions were a little bit better, would they be treating Swift with these kitty gloves, and would they be so slow to bring him back from injuries that kind of sound like
That's
bumps
fair.
and bruises? And if they were a team that's maybe fighting for the division or something, or even just in the playoff race, maybe they'd be pushing for him to come back a little bit more. And I'm sure he's a guy. He seems like a guy that always wants to come back anyways. I don't think he's like any type of wimp or anything like that. He's always lifting his. I don't know if you've ever seen his dad. His dad's a lot like Amon Ra's dad, where he's a trainer. He's a badass, and that's who trains him in the off season. And they're a tough bunch. So I think that the thing with Swift is that moving forward, when they really get their quarterback and they continue to build, I think that he's going to get more carries and they're going to unleash him a little bit more. I think that maybe Detroit sees it as, we suck right now, so why are we going to run our young running back into the ground? Why not save them, for when we're a better team and we can really use them? So I think that this could be a little bit of a buy low opportunity for Amaral as well, where, a year or two from now, if, just like how I realized that, Swift maybe doesn't fit in my window, Amaral could still say, well, you know what, I could still dump him off at the deadline to a contender when Swift's starting to break out, because I still think that Swift can kind of go on like that Kamara track and be really good. So all of a sudden 2 years from now, if Swift's starting to really break out and kind of cement himself in that top 10 and be able to play a full 16, 17 games, Amaral could still sell him for a pretty hefty bag. So even now, if the price tag looks a little high for Amaral, I think that he can definitely recoup that value down the road as long as Swift continues to go like I expect him to.
Yeah, I think that's the question though. It's like I this may have been a window where you could have bought Swift low, but I mean he bought 222 first and 223 first. That's what he paid for him. So like
Yeah.
I don't know how much he can recoup that value. I do think Swift's a bell cow. Like I said, great offensive line. He'll own the backfield next year. Only 23, great team. Like I think that offense is going places next year or 2 years down the road. But I just don't know how much he's going to get back for him. And that was a lot. I felt like Pickens. I don't love Watson, but I love Pickens. Even if like one of those picks next year pans out and Pickens pans out, you're happy with that. Like you get 2 out of 4 there, like you're pretty happy with that. So I
Yeah.
don't know if you can recoup that value. And like I said, I don't love the investment in running backs in a rebuild.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I haven't really touched on Pickens too much, but I truly love Pickens too.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
I
the
think it's
skill
kind of
set's
funny.
there.
I ended up kind of getting the preseason darlings of the last 2 years between Pickens and Elijah Moore, two guys that came
Right.
in, all the rumors that they were tearing it up in camp. And I guess I'm, after the fact, really buying into the hype. But Pickens, he just seems awesome. And
I do think Pickett can get in the ball too, but that offensive line in Pittsburgh is atrocious. I mean, it's so bad. Like
yeah.
Pickett, they're not even. They have to invest in that offensive line in the offseason, and I do think Pickett can get in the ball.
Yeah, and I think that they're in a position where they can afford to kind of do that because they are, they still have, the pieces on defense, right? With, especially with TJ Watt. Once they have TJ Watt, it always seems to kind of turn their season, turn their games around. And then they have these pieces on offense, right? They have their quarterback, they seem to have their receivers, and they never have an issue drafting receivers. They have their tight end, and Najee, there are the questions about him and Jalen, Warren all of a sudden starting to cut into his carries and all that. And
Yep.
I think we've all kind of been on the Najee overrated train for a bit anyways. I know I've been calling him Trent Richardson 2.0 for a long, long time. And we wouldn't have to get too much into it. Mikey Bowen's not here to defend himself. But, I mean, that's a guy, Najee was just a guy, right? He came in, he was old. He was behind all these guys at Alabama. I feel like the red flags were always kind of there. And then in Pittsburgh in his rookie year, sure, he put up this great season, but it was always so based on volume. Now he's coming in and, he's dealing with the injury. And there is a little bit, I think that it's one of those, especially in Dynasty, it's always when the pendulum swings too far, that's kind of the time to buy a guy. And, that's why I suddenly became infatuated with Traylon Burks, because all of a sudden everyone was convinced he sucked because he has asthma. And but then with like Najee Harris, right? It's like now, okay, last year he was overrated, but now it's swinging all this way over here where people are like, well, he sucks.
Right.
The same thing with like Antonio Gibson, right? Antonio Gibson was like rock bottom a couple of weeks ago. Now he's having a little bit of a resurgence. Maybe he's not that top 10, top 15 guy that he was last year. Talking about Gibson, but he still has way more value than people thought he had 2 weeks ago. I feel like Najee could be the same way. Maybe it's not this year, maybe next year when he comes back healthier, he can contribute a little bit more, but he is a guy that is clearly reliant on volume. With an offensive line that bad, the volume's really not there. And with Warren starting to cut into these carries, of course, that's not going to help it either. But yeah, I mean, a guy like Najee Harris, I don't even know how he got started on him. I'll leave.
Yeah, I mean that's a tangent. I don't want to go out my guy Mikey either. He stood up for me. Mikey's had my back recently, so I don't want to go. I'm Team Mikey.
But stay out of the topic of running back. Stay out of the topic of my trade.
What a stray.
I did say how I felt like I was good enough at running back when I made the Swift trade. At that time, I did have Sanders, and I was looking at it where George kind of touched on it, right? He was talking about a running back Sanders' age going for that cheap. And I thought it was a completely even deal. And this was not a trade that I was really looking to do. I really wasn't planning on trading Sanders or Montgomery or Khalil or anybody like that at the deadline after that, because I felt like I was kind of locking myself into these running backs. But once I kind of heard that deal, I was like, let me think about that, because we were talking about it, as soon as the deal was made. But I just feel like, it was kind of inevitable, whether it was at this deadline or next deadline or before the rookie draft next year or something, I was going to trade Sanders. Sanders was not part of my long-term vision. And I felt like, if I wanted to maybe try and be competitive next year or the year after that with Sanders being a free agent, I kind of liked his prospects of signing somewhere else where he wasn't going to have Jalen Hurts vulturing touchdowns or whatever. But it just felt like a little bit too much of a risk, right? And I always talk about, I'm shitting on the most athletic sons for being bag holders and stuff like that. And like we're talking about how we don't want to build too much around running backs, and it seems like we're both bought into that theory. It's like, why would I hold on to it just for the chance that Sanders' value goes up maybe like a tick? And even with that, even if he signs somewhere that's a great situation, he's still a running back that's getting a year older. And we know how people, as soon as they pull up that player card, they see that age, it can really just turn somebody off of a player. So, Ayuk, it didn't feel like a move I had to make. I was comfortable with what I had at wide receiver. As I was saying with London, Burks, Pickens, and then more, I feel really comfortable with that core four to build around. But at the same time, you know, London and Burks, I feel really comfortable with. Of course, Burks is now coming back from that injury. Pickens, he's shown those flashes, but he hasn't broken out yet. Elijah Moore seemed to break out at the end of last year, but now all of a sudden he's in the doghouse in New York this year. So I'm not really, even though I feel like I'm locked in with those four guys, they aren't necessarily here yet.
Right.
And Ayuk now becomes my most established receiver in the room, and he's also very good. Just in general. Not only is he just putting up consistent numbers, but he's been very good. He seems to be heating up right now. So it just felt like, looking at it and how we talk about the longevity of receivers, it felt like a move where I just had to make it, because if I hold on to it, what am I really looking for that's better than getting Ayuk in return? Sure, you could say, this asset that's also equal to Ayuk, but yeah, this just felt like peak value. And like I said, it wasn't a trade I was looking to make. George hit me up for him. He came with that offer, and I said, let me think about it, because the only thing that held me up was what I was saying with the running backs. I felt like I was committing to those four running backs, and then all of a sudden that cuts it down. That makes me really thin, but I do feel confident that I'll be able to get at least a running back with these first round picks. And, maybe the other ones used just on best player available. Maybe somebody happens to drop and it's one of these top receivers that we've always talked about, and all of a sudden I have to take him as well. But then that gives you the flexibility with these other receivers. Maybe I can use them to make other moves or something. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was a pretty even deal all around. And, the one thing I got to say is, and we'll get to this when we talk about it on the wish list, but Two Pins is the only contender that's really making these moves right now. Mm-hmm. And that's what I find interesting for them. And that's why I kind of got to keep them on top right now. And, we'll see how it goes as far as next week's power rankings and, how things shake out, because there's still plenty of days where these teams can make these trades. But, we're talking about all these sellers, but we're not really trying to match them up with buyers. And the Bowen trade, my trade, your trade that we'll get to in a second. These were a lot of teams that are looking to rebuild and maybe tear it down a little bit and plan ahead for the future. We're not seeing these teams that want to compete make these moves. And, Two Pins doing that right now. To me, it gives them the upper leg. What do you think about this deal, though?
I love this deal for you. I think George trying to claim that it was like a full leasing for value is ridiculous. Think about middle-aged running backs at the end of their rookie contracts signing where they went, right? The two that came to mind for me, like two different sides of the sphere here. James Conner, ending in Pittsburgh, signed second contract in Arizona, blew up in Arizona, right, on a touchdown-heavy year last year. Obviously regressed this year, but blew up on that first year. And then I also thought of like Lev Bell, who was nasty on Pittsburgh, but then went to the Jets and absolute dud, like zero value. So like I kind of thought of it that way. Like you're running the risk of the landing spot on Miles Sanders' value. I don't think you could get a higher return than you could have right now. Like maybe he signed somewhere great in a landing spot situation. You can kind of ride that hype off like preseason stuff. But I like you not rolling the dice on where he's going to land next year. And I don't think you could have got much better than Ayuk return. So I like straight
yeah, exactly.
I like it for George too.
What's that?
I like it for George too. Like you said at the end there, like George was a prime candidate to get a running back, right? Like if I'm McMorrow, and we'll talk about this on the wish list, I'm trying to move those running backs to the contenders like George and Vibers. George didn't pay an arm and a leg to get a running back that's going to be sufficient for the playoffs. So like now it kind of takes George out of that running back race or that running back needy team. But go ahead. That's kind of what
I mean, for a team that their weakness is so clearly running back, all of a sudden we're looking at Antonio Gibson, Miles Sanders, who's top 15 right now, and that's with his bye week already factored in. And then, Ramondre Stevenson.
Right.
And, that's a pretty strong three right there. And we saw what they could do with, Darrell Williams getting these starts for them in the playoffs. So,
right. So they're not going to be the ones that go out and pay an arm and a leg for like Henry or Cook or something like that.
Yeah, and Ayuk wasn't really a big part of their picture. I will say I was trying to get Devontae Smith from them, but that was, they viewed him as more expensive, and rightfully so, I think. I love Devontae Smith, but for them, it was either going to be Smith or Ayuk, and they're only starting one of them, either week. And they have Jamar Chase, who's not playing right now, but it sounds like he's not going to be out for as long as originally projected, anyways. And if they get him back for that playoff run, and even if they don't, I mean, that team is just so stacked that adding Sanders here is a big thing. And one thing I'll say, and we can dive deeper into it after we talk the rest of these trades, but sometimes you have to just almost make a trade as like a way of defense, right? Because if you don't go out and get this guy, somebody else will.
Right.
And if two pins didn't go out and make this trade when they need a running back, who's to say that somebody wouldn't come along in the next coming days where I had Sanders on the block and make an offer, and all of a sudden, just like we're saying now, or two pins kind of gets that leg up on these teams right now. If it wasn't them, it could have been somebody else, and all of a sudden you're allowing yourself to fall behind in the playoff race. And I will say, I'm a little worried about these top four teams that are getting complacent. But we could dig a little bit deeper into that. But I think right now it's time to give you the floor. This is actually, well, I guess now it's not our freshest trade because the Ayuk and Sanders one just happened,
Right.
but this was quite a trade, and it sounded like it was going to be a true huge blockbuster with maybe some other teams getting involved. You guys ended up getting your own deal done, but you received CD Lamb from the Most Athletic Sons for Jalow's 23 first and Bowen's 23 first. The floor is yours, Pete. How are you feeling about that one?
Yeah, I mean, this trade, this was always the plan. This was always the plan. Not this soon, but this was always the plan. I said it last episode when George kind of came at me about, he went on like a 10-minute tangent about how he hates rebuilding teams or whatever. Went about, oh, you have 5 picks. What are you going to hit on one of them? I came back. If you run the tape back last episode, I literally came right back at him and said, there's no chance that I take 5 players.
I remember.
Yeah, so it was always the plan to package 1 or 2 of these picks for an elite wide receiver or an elite running back. We talked about I like to invest in running back wide receivers. I really wanted to shore up my wide receiver room first in this rebuild. I just expected to do a deal like this on the clock. I expect to do it on the clock after the NFL draft at the peak hype of these 23 picks, because I do think the 23 class is insane and people are going to fall in love with it. I didn't expect it to come this early, but when the opportunity presented itself, I felt that I needed to jump at it, and I wouldn't be able to get a guy like CD. When you can get a guy like CD, I wanted to get a guy like CD. I didn't want to roll the dice and try to make another run at him at the draft. I saw my opportunity, I jumped at it. But this trade, there's a lot to peel behind the curtain back here. It used to be, it was a lot bigger before we kind of narrowed it down to just CD for those 2 picks. KB, what did you hear about the trade before it actually went down?
Yeah, so I actually ended up hearing from all parties involved. I heard from you that there was, potentially a huge deal in the works, and almost like within 2 seconds of getting that text from you, Jalo was texting me saying that there was a big thing. So all of a sudden I was texting you because I was saying, give me the details. And then I said, nope, I have all the details. And then what I learned was that we were looking at, and should we show how the sausage is made? I think so, right? So Bowen, so you could put all cards on the table here. Bowen was involved. It was going to be a 3-team deal. We were looking at Dak Prescott getting involved. There were going to be some other picks moving around, my second rounder, all this stuff. Jalo was going to be getting a complete haul, I will say. And then all of a sudden, right, I'm making myself some eggs. It's a early afternoon type thing. I'm just making myself some eggs, some sausage, some toast, and then didn't want to get, my hands were getting a little dirty. I clean up, and then I pick up my phone and see a deal's made. And I open it up and I see CD Lamb for 2 first rounders. And I seriously, I started scrolling like this. I was like, where's the rest of the deal? I was like, what the hell happened? I thought there was like a glitch on the app or something, because I was so shocked that this didn't go through. And I will say, I was surprised that it fell apart, but at the same time, and I think it's pretty funny. I'd love to look back at some of these 3-team deals and see, because it never really feels like these 3-team deals are true 3-team deals where I give this person something and this person something, and then I get something from both people and all that. Typically there's a star of the 3-team deal where they're getting all the assets and then they're shelling out to those. And it's really, it's almost like how Amaral accepted my trade and Bowen trade at the same time. We could have just meshed those together, made it one deal, and it would have been the same thing that, this deal would have been, where you were making your trade with Angelo was making his trade with Bowen, and you guys just combined them. But Bowen, he ended up, it sounded like he tried to overplay his hand. Maybe he thought that he had some leverage. He thought that he could demand a few more picks, and all of a sudden he squeezed himself right out of it, and you guys got the deal done. And to be honest, I'm not really sure if Bowen's going to be able to get that deal anymore. And,
Yeah.
I thought it was a pretty good deal. And, we talked about it though. I will say, I was a little surprised to hear that Angelo, one, was looking to sell CD, who I thought was truly untouchable, and then also to sell Dak. And that almost feels like the kiss of death, or maybe I'm projecting a little bit, but, I put the untouchable tag on Mike Evans. I put it on DeAndre Swift. All of a sudden I trade him right away.
Right.
And, Angelo, he's putting all these guys on the block. And he names like 4 guys untouchable, and all of a sudden he trades nobody on the block, and he trades 2 of those untouchable guys. So it does feel like that's maybe the kiss of death. You say, I don't think I'm going to trade these guys. Then you get that deal, and it's like, oh shit, maybe I got to take this. But I thought it was a great trade for both of you guys. CD in the first, I think that you got, like you said, you're trying to build around these receivers as well. You got a premier receiver. We were talking about it offline, but sure, CD hasn't put up that top 10 season. He's working on it right now. But the big thing with him is that he's part of the 88 club. And Jerry Jones is a guy where
88.
And Jerry Jones is a guy where when he gets this thing in his head, like he's gonna stand by you and like you're his guy. Once you're his guy, you're his guy. And Michael Irvin, Des Bryant,
Willie Weathers.
What's that?
Willie Weathers.
Yeah. So, but we've seen it where it's like these guys become stars. Do you get given that number? CD Lamb was given that number on draft night. And I remember because he was a guy that I loved coming out of college. I took him in my first dynasty league before this one ever existed. And I was pumped. I said, holy shit, I have to get, knowing that he's not only on the Cowboys, but he's getting 88. I have to have him on my team. So I love that for you, but I also love this for Angelo, because I thought that Angelo today, I saw a lot of similarities to kind of the philosophy behind my Swift deal, where you're sitting on this guy that's an absolute gold mine. You kind of need that breathing room. And, this gives him an opportunity. It kind of gives him another chance to, find a guy, because you can go out and you could still find a really good receiver. I mean, he could be looking at the first receiver off the board with his pick. And whoever he sees fit, I think it's a pretty good list of prospects at the top there. And then, with Bowen, it's like, who knows where Bowens is at, right? Bowen's always, a threat to go on a little bit of a playoff run. But at the same time, we're seeing a questionable team who is currently a top 3 seed, right? But not getting a first round bye. So, and really has no shot at the first round bye given his points. So that could be a first round exit. That could be the 6th overall pick. And it could be even worse, because he's, maybe looking to make these sales. And if he happens to fall out of the playoff race, that could be, just based on where he'd be, that could be the 4th, that could be the 5th pick as well. So, Angelo could be looking at making 2 top 6 picks here. And that's a pretty good haul for CD. And, you got the sure thing. He gets to roll the dice with some prospects. So I think it's an interesting deal. And, that was actually one point I want to make about my trade with Amaral too, is that, sure, I got the Vibers 23 first, and I got Simcoe's 23 first. And we know Simcoe's going to be 112. But all it takes is, if the Vibers don't win this division, all it takes is a first round upset. I could be holding the 7th overall pick.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all it takes. And, Simcoe, he doesn't necessarily have the, division unlock either. And, these are 2 teams that, Vibers, they're the wild card team right now. It could take 2 weeks and all of a sudden Simcoe's a wild card team. Say both of those teams happen to get upset in the first round. That could be a huge come up for me. But at the same time, it could also be holding the 11th and 12th pick. Yeah. So there's a little bit of a risk there, but with Angelo, it's like it feels like where with his team is at, he's kind of locked into that 4th overall pick with his pick. And then, Bowen's pick has a lot of upside for him. So, I'm excited to kind of see how this, ends up for them. And then, I think it's a very good deal for both sides. And you got any closing statements on that?
Well, yeah, to finish the mechanics discussion of the trade, Bowen missed the train on this. Like the train left the station with Bowen holding his dick on the side of it because he got petty. So the trade was in place. It was the exact trade that did happen. The only addition to it was that Bowen and Gillo had a deal on the side that was Debo and your 23 second for Dak Prescott.
Mm-hmm.
This deal was done. Gillo said, good, I'm in, let's do it. I said, okay, I'm in, let's do it. Dak was in, let's do it. And then Zach got petty, asked for a 24 third, a dart throw 24 third over a year away from now. It held the trade talks up about an hour. And then that's when Gillo and Sam came to the realization that they were kind of giving Bowen a layup of a deal here, giving him Dak, a top tier quarterback. And they were just like, we don't need to do that. Alex, we don't need to do that. Let's do the CD trade. And I was like, I don't need to deal with this. Like I have my deal done. Let's do it. So that's kind of how it went down. Bowen's in denial that happened, but I'm telling you that he's going to look back at that and not be happy about it, in my opinion. But,
yeah. And I think it's kind of, some sweet irony, just because, last night you were talking to us in our group chat and I was joking around about these guys in this league. And, I've talked about it plenty before too, where, everybody just wants to squeeze out like another third, and
Yeah, it's like if the deal's done, and it's like, hey, just give me one more third round pick, or hey,
yeah,
make that second or first, or hey, make that second or first, and I'll throw you in a third. It's just like it's
yeah,
petty
and
bullshit in a
it's
trade.
always in these blockbuster deals where it's
Right.
like, why are we losing sight of the main goal where we're moving these
Exactly.
huge players?
For
You
a
were talking
third round
'cause I
pick.
was saying to Angelo too, and yeah, I was kind of arguing on both sides of the fence where I mean, in Bowen's case, he really didn't have the leverage to be doing that. But at the same time, a lot of times I'm of the mindset where it's like, all right, fuck it. Like just take the third and just get the deal
Yeah.
done. But I
Right.
actually kind of, when I was talking to you about it, I realized I was actually wrong. Once I saw where Bowen was coming from with it, I realized I was wrong because he really had no
No leverage.
stand on to say that. And, and we saw what happened. And, but the one thing I was saying to Angelo too, and you could say it from both sides, right? Where maybe Angelo should have just thrown it in and gotten the deal if he wanted to trade Dak that badly. And then kind of talking through with Angelo, I realized we were both talking. We're like, wait, why the hell are you trying to trade Dak? It's like, what?
Right.
Why not
Why?
hold on
Yeah.
to Dak? And we were talking about it
Yeah.
when you get a quarterback like that, where Dak's 29 years old. Anytime he's healthy, he's putting up these massive numbers. But when you can get a quarterback in a super flex league that is capable of giving you 20 points a week, like you have to hold on to that.
Right. Right.
And when he's got these older guys, when he's got these running backs, and then he's got Tom Brady, it's like, how about you maybe worry about those first? But also, what I was saying to him, I was like, if you really want to do this deal, then just throw the third in, because I did think that it was still a solid deal for him. He's getting Debo,
Right.
he's getting what's projected to be a early second
15th.
rounder in return
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well.
15th
And
overall.
and the thing is, like, it's a third rounder, and like you had said, it's a dart throw. And
Heart throw.
when you look at this past third round, right? Brian Robinson, Romeo Dobbs, and I can't even remember who Wandale Robinson. Those
Yeah.
are like the three hits of the third round for this
Right.
year. And when you look at that, it's like, right, these are guys where Robinson, he's, kind of a between the tackles running back. He's getting, his 15 carries a game, but he's only getting 4 yards a carry. He
We're
doesn't have the
talking
receiving
6 to 8
upside.
points a week at
Yeah,
max.
Dobbs, he was like the preseason darling, and we've
Right.
seen him show his flashes, but at the same time, you do have to wonder about his upside. And then Wandale too, he's kind of a guy where he's shown those flashes too, but we haven't really seen him put together these full games and really go off. And those are like typical hits of a third round pick. And
Right.
those are guys that belong on rosters and they can play for you in bye weeks. And
But not even in the same
for
conversation
rosters
as
as thin
Dak
as
and
ours,
Debo.
they get starts on a weekly basis. But
Yeah.
it's like, for the most part, those aren't guys that you can count on as building blocks for your team. So it's like when the third rounder is but then you could also say that from Bowen's side too. It's like, you have the chance to get Dak Prescott. Everything that we just said about finding this quarterback that gets you all these points, you got to hold on to him. And you did that for a chance to, maybe draft, Terry McLaurin was a third round pick in a lot of rookie drafts, to
Right.
maybe draft Terry McLaurin, to maybe expect to draft a guy like Romeo Dobbs, and then to also potentially draft a guy like Jalen Tolbert or these other third rounders that we just never hear from again. And
Right.
it's like, you let that slip through your hands all over that. And it's like, now it sounds like that deal's not going to happen. It sounds like Dak really might just be off the table completely. And that sucks. And, I think a lot of people kind of have those deals. I know that I have deals where I had an offer on my plate and I was unsure because I was like, well, I kind of like this guy's upside. And then a couple weeks later, the guy ends up not being any good. And I'm like, fuck, I could have had this guy that was like
Right.
top tier.
Right.
And so, that does maybe feel like maybe a little bit of a miscalculation on Bowen's part, but at the same time, that was going to be a huge trade in his favor. And I think that he's still working the lines. I think that he might still be able to find that quarterback that he's looking for, but it might not have that same superstar upside as Dak. But
Yeah.
yeah,
In
I mean,
terms
it
of
was interesting to see everything unfold. And then, like I said, I opened it and I couldn't believe that the deal was so short. I was expecting
right.
this massive blockbuster.
In terms of like the actual deal, I'm like not I don't love it. I'm not in love with it. And the reason being is like I think on the surface, you talked about Jalo's pick being the 1-4. He's like 50 max points for behind Mikey to get that pick. So probably gonna happen, right? That's probably gonna be the 1-4. I own the 1, 2, and 3. So like I control what that fourth pick is. I haven't been too secretive about who I'm looking at for the 1 through 3. Like I've said, it's Bijan, it's Bryce Young, it's Gibbs. I didn't really trade the 1-4. I kind of traded CJ Stroud, right? Like that's how I kind of was looking at it. So like I think on the surface, like 2 first rounders for CD looks good, but if CJ Stroud turns out to be a top 15 quarterback that's getting 20 points a week, then I could very well lose this deal. So I'm always going to end up looking at it like, okay, I gave up whatever quarterback I don't take next year for CD Lamb. And then that pick for Bowen probably 1-7. I think that's 1-7, 1-8. It's probably like a Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnson type deal. I was gonna go wide receiver with that pick. I was feeling like I was gonna go wide receiver with that pick anyway. So I think it's really a measuring stick for CJ Stroud for me. Unless I have a change of heart and decide to go two quarterbacks with the first three. But that's how I kind of looked at it.
Yeah, it's the thing. It's like, I mean, sure, you gave up the pick, but as you're saying, you do kind of control the destiny in that sense where, if you catch wind that Jalil really wants a guy and he's maybe not interested in these other guys and he's really looking at a CJ Stroud and he's really banking on trying to get that second quarterback for his team with that pick, you can kind of hold them a little bit hostage and maybe
Right.
squeeze something out of it.
And then
Which
Jalot did accept the trade pretty fast. Like it's not it's never a great feeling when you put an offer out there and they love it and
yeah,
they're
like,
like,
all right,
okay,
let's do it. Let's do it now.
yeah, it's kind of like, okay, like maybe I could have got away with giving him like Simcoe's 24 first instead or something like that. Like I think I went a little too heavy, but once it's out there, it's out there. And I kind of was like, I don't want to miss my chance at CD. And there's a 23-year-old wide receiver who's put up top 20 seasons his first 2 years. This is only his third year. And I think he's like one of those top five, like not top five, probably like top 10 guys, the youngest of the top 10 guys, I'd say. And now I feel great about my wide receiver room, right? Like CD Lamb, Garrett Wilson, Michael Pittman, Jameson Williams coming back. Judy's showing flashes this year. Ridley's in a new situation. So, I feel good about my wide receiver room as the first piece of this rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, CD, he's wide receiver 16, and that's coming off a bye week. He was
Right.
top 10 before that. And like I said, I mean, I'm personally very, very high on CD. So, you get the endorsement from me, but I think it was a good trade for both sides. I think it's one of those where both teams kind of accomplished what they were looking for. This is what you wanted to get. And, outside of Jefferson, Chase, and, I don't even really know who else, but those guys are almost
AJ Brown.
unattainable.
Yeah.
It's like, what better could you ask for in a dynasty
Right.
situation to get this guy, 88 club, 23 years old, has already put up these top 20 seasons and he seems to be, and, he was doing that. Now he's really getting, this is his wide receiver room. So,
Right.
I feel like we're working towards this breakout. And if he can put that top 15 year, I mean, this is a guy that has top 10 upside every year moving forward to me. So yeah, I think it's a great deal. But, on the topic of Jalot, let's get to our wish list, what we hope to see moving forward, what we hope to be talking about next week, following the trade deadline. Jalot, as I was saying, he made this was kind of a surprise to me, not only seeing him trade CD, but also seeing him putting Dak on the block like that and nearly selling him, because those are two guys that he had ruled untouchable and he put all these guys on. So with Jalot, one thing that I'm really hoping to see moving forward going into this deadline is that he does sell off these running backs. And I think most importantly, he sells off Brady, right? I mean, there are still buyers out there. I think it's dwindling a little bit, but I mean, I think Big Brain for sure would be looking to get a quarterback, and Brady would be a perfect fit for them. Maybe Bowen is still looking to get that quarterback and he could be after Brady. I don't really know who else would be looking for it though, right? Because I don't think McMorrow is looking for a quarterback anymore. If he's looking to sell, I don't think that really matches with what Wallace is trying to do. Mikey doesn't need that. The Vibers, two pins, of course, they don't need it either. So that market is dwindling a little bit, and you don't want to see him hold the bag, but I think even more importantly is that he should really be trying to sell off these running backs, right? I mean, we just saw what I was able to get for Sanders. He's got Cordarrelle. He's got is Deontay Foreman a guy that he holds on to? I mean, that's a guy that he's flashing right now. Maybe you try and cash in. I mean, he got Foreman for what? He got Foreman for 20 fab. Maybe that's a guy that you try to cash in on. A guy like Clyde, who's all of a sudden losing all this value. Even a guy like Jamal Williams, who seems to be peaking. James Conner, who's coming back off that injury. Try and capitalize off of these guys. I think we still got to see it, right? Jalot made a really good splash move, but he still hasn't made the moves that I think he has to make. He didn't necessarily have to make that CD trade, but I think he made a good deal. He has to get rid of these running backs. At this point, I don't even want to say that he has to get rid of Brady, because I don't even know what Brady's price is. I don't know what really a fair deal is.
Yeah.
Like I think the first is out of the question. Maybe you can squeeze a 24 or 25 first out of a team like Big Brain that's desperate for a quarterback like that. But I don't really know what you can really expect to get for Brady, because the years that he has left are unknown. Maybe now with the divorce, he's suddenly going to play until he's 60. Maybe after everything that he went through this year, he might just say, this was not worth it at all. I'm going to go get my family back and retire again. And, regardless, he's 45. He's old as shit, and this is a dynasty league. So I don't know how much a team's looking to give up. And he's not playing great either. I mean, he's playing, okay. He's what, quarterback 14. He's putting up, about shit, like 15, 16 points a game, it looks like. So it's like, he's not this world beater anymore. He's looking a little bit weaker. That's kind of hurting his value. I still think that Brady should have been a preseason guy. You should have traded him as soon as he came back, but you could still get some deals for him. And with where they're at, and they're starting to get these first rounders and they're getting these second rounders as well. Maybe you just take whatever you can get for Brady, as long as you're not getting completely lowballed, and you just say, fuck it, give me, 2 second rounders or something, and just take what you can get and really look to just stock up on that draft and do all that. What else are you looking for at this deadline though?
Yeah, I mean, Jalot, like you see, we're talking about Jalot's team here, so like just focusing on him is like he did make a move, did breathe himself new life with these picks, but he moved one of those cornerstones, right? So he still has these decaying assets. You said it. I think his must sells are Brady and would you call like, I mean, I think Cordell Patterson, right? So those two probably must sells. I don't even think like there's a market for these guys. Like you said it, like we were kind of always waiting for them to hit the button when in terms of Jalot or McMorrow to fire sell these assets, but we never even thought about like they'd be screaming to sell these guys and no one would want to buy them. So I don't know. I think it's less more of like what Brady's worth and it's more about what you can get for him. Like even like Jared Goff, like I think also like you can look at like matchups. Like I think Goff, I know I checked like last night. Goff is playing like Chicago and Carolina the last 2 games of the season. That's semifinals and playoffs. Like maybe you get a third rounder out of Goff who's probably gonna lose his year next year. Just like small things, like you got to start looking for where these guys fit in other people's teams. And it's not about what they're worth; it's about what you can get for them because they're gonna be worth nothing next year.
Yeah, because even if you're getting pennies on the dollar, sometimes it's just better to take
It's
that
something.
than
It's something.
all of a sudden have them retire on your team and you get zero for them.
Right.
So yeah, maybe they're in a position where they're gonna almost have to get fleeced just for the sake of getting them off their team. But
Exactly.
I mean, I like going back to kind of where my team was at last year, right? Where I had a team where if I kept them just on paper, I could have been, I think, plenty competitive this year. But at the same time, I'm so happy. I don't even remember what I traded for some of these guys, but I'm just happy that I got rid of guys like Michael Thomas, Clyde, Keenan Allen, even Adam Thielen, who's taken a big step back this year. Where, like I said, I don't really even remember what I got in these deals for them, but I'm just happy that I don't have to deal with them because they're not my problem anymore. I don't have to
exactly.
suddenly try and find, some value. Like I wouldn't be able to get anything from Michael Thomas anymore.
Right.
Same with Keenan Allen. He
It's
hasn't.
not about what they're worth. It's about what you can get for them, right? At this point.
Yeah, and like when you're headed in that direction where you're trying to tear it down, you're trying to become a rebuilding team, and you're trying to get some youth. It's like, I think you can almost look at what he acquired for these guys, right? I traded, Connor and Patterson to him with your second rounder for this year, and I got 223 or 222 second rounders, 222 third rounders, and I think those became, Zamir White, Brian Robinson. I forget who else, Tyrion Davis Price, who ended up not being anything. And then I forget who else I took with those picks. But, it's like that gave me a chance, right? And then, those were dart throws and
one panned out.
Yeah, and Brian Robinson, he's got that starting role now. He's young. Zamir White, I feel like is kind of following that Damian Harris track. I look back, Damian Harris had 4 carries his rookie year.
Yeah,
which is crazy. I knew that he was very limited. I did not
Exactly.
realize he only carried the ball 4 times. I thought it was going to be like, oh, yeah, you got like, a couple of games where you got 5 carries or something. But yeah, it's crazy. It's like, so, I'm not giving up on Zamir White either. That's neither here nor there. But yeah, I feel like he just, maybe that's what he has to look at. And maybe find this contender that wants to get some running backs and, just package them together. And like I said, sometimes pennies on the dollar, or I'd say all the time, pennies on the dollar is worse than 0 cents at all,
Right.
But that's kind of the big thing too. So we were touching on McMorrow a little bit and him selling his running backs. My question though is, and we were talking about those 2 pins, who's buying though? That's really the big thing. We have these sellers, right? We have our sellers kind of established. I don't really see who these buyers are right now. It doesn't sound too promising. I was thinking that maybe 2 pins and the Suns could be a perfect fit because of their need for running backs and, who they had, but it doesn't sound like they've had any talks at all. We just saw 2 pins address their running back needs. Maybe they're still looking at it for a little extra depth or something, but I'm not seeing it. I mean, maybe the Vivers looking to go get it. I don't think that Big Brain's really looking to stock up at running back. I don't really know what Simcoe's looking to do either, but that's what I'm kind of worried about with these teams is, maybe McMorrow can attract, more people because of who he's selling with these running backs, but it doesn't sound like there's much of a buyer's market out there right now. What are you hearing? Because you always have your ear to the streets.
Yeah, I'm here leaves on the streets, broadcaster of whispers, nibbler of narratives. But that's what I'm hearing. There's not many people buying. I mean, you look at like if you take your positions and then look at where they fit, that's the approach you got to have. So like if I'm McMorrow trying to move Brady, I'm probably looking at Big Brain, who's been starting Taylor Heineke because Ryan Tannehill's banged up. But like I think Big Brain feels great about going to the playoffs with Ryan Tannehill and Aaron Rodgers. I don't know how much of a good strategy that is, but they're kind of fine with that. Two pins, quarterbacks, fine. Vibers, fine. Simcoe, fine. Like there's not just because you're at the rooftops yelling that you're going to sell doesn't mean there's buyers. And I don't think there's really a market for quarterbacks. I don't really think there's a whole market for running backs. Two pins took care of them with Miles Sanders. Big Brain is a powerhouse of running backs. Simcoe's got Jacobs and Saquon. Maybe the Vipers could use a running back, but then again, are they going to give an arm and a leg for a Derrick Henry, or they would rather, cop out and sell like a smaller piece or picks for like a guy like Miles Sanders who's just going to get it done? But yeah, I don't hear that there's a lot of people buying right now. And I think that, we were saying McMorrow's going to get caught holding the bag. And for at least this trade deadline, it looks like it. I'm not optimistic he's going to get a deal done.
Yeah, because I mean, even Simcoe, I think would be interesting maybe to keep an eye on just because he does have Saquon, who's obviously playing at somewhat of an MVP level. Josh Jacobs has had those huge games.
Right.
He doesn't really have much behind that. The only issue with Simcoe is that he doesn't really have that draft capital to trade. I think that what could be interesting is maybe he looks to move a guy like Pitts. I don't know how interested McMorrow is, considering he also has
Simcoe's
Mark
been
Andrews.
shopping Pitts for sure.
Yeah, but I know Simcoe's been shopping Pitts around. As I mentioned earlier, he was trying to get Swift for Pitts, something like that. So maybe McMorrow is interested in that, but he does have Andrews, and holding on to two tight ends like that just kind of seems like maybe a waste of space, right?
Right.
And maybe a guy like DJ Moore can get McMorrow interested as well, but yeah, it's weird because I don't think that for Big Brain that would just be kind of a dumb use of their assets, right? To go and get this, because now all of a sudden you're going to have, if they may go out and make this big trade for say Derrick Henry, then all of a sudden you're looking at Henry, Mixon, McCaffrey, Chubb, and Eckler, and one of them, unless
you just don't need it.
Hey, maybe they say, fuck it, let's not make this move for quarterback. Let's make this move for running back when we start that fifth running back in the super flex spot. It could be an interesting strategy.
Yeah, I mean, not that.
Come playoff time, you got 5 running backs getting you 20 points a game.
That would be insane. If you had a Derrick Henry to that running back stable, that's insane.
So all of a sudden it seems maybe a little plausible. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I don't know who's out there.
I just don't see Big Brain making a big buy before the deadline. They did it last year with Mixon. It worked out great for them. I mean, they're dominating the league right now. I don't think they feel the pressure to make a buy. I think they can still compete for a championship, and I don't see them paying an arm and a leg for a guy like Henry or Cook.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's just tough looking around the league. I mean, maybe the Vibers, they get involved because they do have some first rounders. They have a 23 first. Mikey's got a 23 first. I think Mikey could be an interesting buyer, because I think where Mikey's at too is that he's not really in a position to tear it down. And
no, he's got a very young team.
And he's also in a position to strike and get into these playoffs. And especially with how McMorrow wants to tear it down, Jalow's removing himself from the race, Mikey can slip into the 6th spot. So it's like he's in a spot too, or maybe he uses his pick to try and get that. I mean, he's got that 23 first, that 25 first. If he sells one of those, if he can sell those for, I don't know what McMorrow's asking price is for some of these guys, but if he gets one of these top 2 running backs, that could put his team, over the top a little bit. Because now all of a sudden, you got Fields playing at this crazy level that elevates his team a bunch. Burrow's always putting up these big points, and Mikey's got a decent little roster, and running back is his weak spot. So Mikey could be a little bit of a buyer. I haven't heard much on that end. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like teams are out there really looking. I feel like a lot of teams in this top 4, and especially, I mean, how Big Brain gets, Big Brain, they get all big on their britches. They sit on their throne. They think they're all set. It's a little pompous, right? You're going at them. Oh, you mean you're shitting on us for negotiating?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I called Big Brain out earlier this week for exactly what they're just the kings of nickel and diming. They're going to ask for a third be a second be a first, add a third. it's just always nickel and dime trying to squeeze the life out of you with big brain. And I tell my associates that I care about not to work with the brain because of that reason.
And Big Brain, they've shown that they are totally fine with finishing third place, getting their money back. Their aspirations don't seem to be too high with such a loaded roster. So it just feels like there's maybe some complacency out of this top four. And then it seems like everybody now wants to be a seller instead of a buyer. So
Right.
it seems if I'm McMorrow, I'm maybe feeling a little panicked right now. You really make these goals so public and you, like you said, shouting it from the rooftops that you're selling. It doesn't seem like anybody's really here. It seems like people are just kind of looking up and saying, "Oh, that's nice."
Yeah.
I hope he finds
Like,
somebody.
let's say McMorrow can't sell, right? He has to hold in these backs. He's going to make a playoff. I mean, he's putting up 120 a week sometimes. Like, he could absolutely make a run in these playoffs. I don't expect him to win, but he could. Let's say he holds on. What does the value take a hit? What does value of like Henry and Cook, Deontay Johnson, like, do they take a hit next year? Do you think he's gonna be able to get the same value that he could now next year?
I don't know. I mean, I feel
Like,
like
at what
right
at
now,
what point is it just like, if these guys aren't buying, I can't cut Henry and Cook loose because I need to get a good return on
yeah, it's like, I mean, Henry all of a sudden, right? He'll be 29 next year. Dalvin Cook will be 28, and they can still put up these things. I was kind of saying, I think before the season where, yeah, I feel like the progression, right, is they go from top 5 to all of a sudden they're, maybe top 15, and then maybe they go back to top 20. I think when you look at like Melvin Gordon and where he's finished over the years, that's a very natural progression of kind of how these running backs go. Derrick Henry could just be a total freak that, you know, runs and then maybe all of a sudden when he's like 33, the wheels just fall off. But I mean, he's so big that, Derrick Henry can hold on to value, but at the same time,
it.
good Lord. But at the same time, it's like they're kind of just their value might just be staying afloat, but their value is not going to go up.
No.
And it's like, if Derrick Henry goes off for 50 points this week, that's not going to raise his value because that's, something that we know is part of the Derrick Henry experience. And he's going to have these insane games. It's like all that can happen. It's what I was trying to say to Angelo before the season with Brady. It's like, okay, so if Brady goes into the season and he puts up 20 points a game, nobody's going to suddenly be like, oh shit, like Tom Brady's really good.
No.
We're going to be like, okay, Tom Brady is playing like Tom Brady.
Right.
All that you're doing by holding on to these guys is risking the downside of them going down because their value can't really go up at all. So the more that you hold on to them, it's not going to help you at all. So, you could still maybe hold on to them and maybe be competitive next year. And maybe we're in the same spot next year where McMorrow says, all right, now I'm going to tear it down. I'm going to try and get these 24 picks. But by then somebody could also be ahead of the curve and they could have the 24 picks. They could have the 25 picks. All of a sudden the 26 picks, they pop up and now people start trading them. And it's like, at some point you just have to say, screw it. I'm going to make this move. And we were talking about it with, you were saying how McMorrow, it's kind of an all or nothing approach where he wants to trade all these guys. And if he doesn't, then he's going to hold them. But that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, if you can get, and I don't know what the price is on any of these guys because I haven't really been in the market for them, but say you could get 2 firsts for Derrick Henry, you're going to turn it down because
I'm smashing that.
but you're going to turn it down because
you can't move Cook
you can't get a good deal for Dalvin Cook or something. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's like, even if you get stuck holding one of them, it's better off that you got a bag for one of them.
I think he's married to this concept that like he either wants to compete this year because he is going to be a playoff team or sell everything. And like it's not really realistic in my opinion. You can't hold one deal.
And
he wants to hit
first.
He already has to hit accept on every deal at the same time, which it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's like sometimes you just have to say, and because I've had that too, where you make these trades and then you say, shit, if I knew that I could get this trade, then maybe I wouldn't have done that one. But it's like sometimes you have to you have to do your best and you have to accept that, maybe not every decision is going to be perfect, but you have to do your best to do what's in your team's best interest and what can help you move forward towards your goal. And McMorrow, he already has his 23 first. If he can get another one and then maybe, some 24 picks or some 23 seconds, I don't really know where those are allocated to. But it's like he has that first. He can get that next building block for his franchise. And it's like, he's got guys like Wandale and Tyquan that could be interesting fringe players for him. But it's like, go out and get that youth and really commit to that. Or go out and start buying and commit to competing because right now you're in a spot where it's going to take some luck for you to win out of the 6th seed. And, not to say that it can't happen. I mean, we've seen teams go on those runs, but it's like, if you're going to not make these trades, you're going to commit to competing, then commit to competing instead of just staying in the middle, maybe going on a Cinderella run, but more likely than not staying in the middle. And then all of a sudden you're just in the same spot next year with older assets, and it's going to be harder to trade them. So I don't know. I mean, I think the pressure's on him. And like I said, if I'm him now, I'm kind of, maybe my chest is feeling a little tighter and I'm like, oh shit, maybe I did make a mistake. But I don't know. You got anything else that you're looking for heading into this deadline?
Not personally. I mean, I guess the one small thing, I think Simcoe is definitely going to make a move. I think he kind of shook the boat a little bit. He really threw DJM and Pitts out there. I know he's been talking about getting a right or tight end, so I think he could benefit from going after guys like Hawk from Wallace or Goddard from Amaral, who are clearly out of it. So I expect a move there. I do think McMorrow should try to send one running back to the Vibers. I think they're the last team that could kind of use one more back. Maybe Simcoe to get a little depth behind Jacobs and Saquon. And then I think Bowen should get a quarterback, probably Kirk from McMorrow, maybe Brady from Jalo, or I think that kind of off the table. But those were the kind of three situations that I saw specifically: Bowen getting Kirk or Brady or Dak, McMorrow sending a running back Hooker Henry to Vibers, and then Simcoe getting a tight end from Hawk or Wallace or Goddard from Amaral.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a pretty good take. And yeah, I mean, it is. I feel like people are so focused, like I said, people are so focused on the sellers that maybe some guys can swoop in and kind of under the radar suddenly make these moves. And yeah, I mean, everybody's always looking at Bowen, everybody's looking at Jalo and McMorrow to sell, but who knows? I mean, maybe Wallace could be a bit of a seller, like you're saying. Maybe Simcoe's looking to make a little bit of a splash. And I agree. I think he's really been trying to move on from Pitts. I think now he's really trying to move on from DJ Moore as well. I think that him putting them on the block today was very serious, and I think he's really trying to get them off his team. And I think that's a good move for him, right? I mean, I still think you can't really give up on Pitts. I think him and London are both complete victims of the system right now, and Mariota was just miserable to watch tonight. It was incredible some of the things that he was doing in a very bad way. But it's like, I think that once they get their quarterback, I think that right now Arthur Smith is just saying, when we run the ball, we can be effective. We can win games like that. I think that it will open up for them. I do not think it's worth giving up. But when you're in Simcoe's position, you could be looking to trade a guy like Pitts because of that, because you have to say, I have to get myself a tight end that can help me win now. And, you still got to hold Pitts to that value. You can't be selling him for too much cheaper, because the guy just, he almost broke the rookie record for tight end receiving yards. And, he is living up to that hype. And it might not feel like it because he wasn't scoring the touchdowns last year and he's not getting the huge numbers yet, but it's like, we've seen these tools. And when that, his struggles are because of his situation, not because of his talent, his value shouldn't take too much of a hit. So yeah, I think it will be interesting to see what Simcoe does leading up to it. I think Simcoe could be an interesting buyer. The Vibers always seem to be working something. You never hear from them. And, I feel like two pins, maybe unless we're looking to add some fringe depth pieces or something, I think that maybe they're done. And I don't know. I'm kind of counting out Big Brain. I feel like they're just nickel and diamond. They're a little complacent with where they're at right now. As I said at the start of the episode, I'm giving two pins the upper hand right now. They seem to be the only team that's being aggressive. They're trying to get better. They're not resting on their laurels. So, two pins, they're getting my support, but I know that Simcoe's going to make this trade. I know that I'm locked in at 112 with his pick, and we know that this is Simcoe's year. So he's going to figure something out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Pete, you got anything else before we sign off?
No, so that's about it. Shout out 88 Club. Shout out Willie Weathers. Is that Malik I see at the 9-hole on that board behind you?
Yeah, it is. That's my definitive top 10.
Shout out Malik. Shout out Willie Weathers. Shout out 88s.
Yeah, so hopefully next week. I mean, next week we've got the power rankings. I'm excited to do the power rankings. After the deadline, with a little bit of a shakeup. I'm hoping, really hoping that we see some more moves, and I hope that we have some more stuff to talk about. But thank you to Sundog Multimedia. Thank you to Easy Peasy Moving and Service. This has been a good. Yeah, how the hell do I stop this record?